for several weeks we didn't finish our talk about the last sacrament of the church, which is the sacrament of the priesthood. And I remember we stopped in talking about the rank of deacons, And we reach to talk about the full deacon, the consecrated deacon. Like Deacon Bolus and Deacon Suleiman in this church, they are full deacons and consecrated deacons as well. Today we'd like to speak a little bit about the responsibilities of the deacon. It is very important to know what is the responsibility of the deacon, not only for the deacons themselves, but also for us as a congregation, and also as fellow deacons who are sharing the service with the full deacon. In order to know who's doing what, in what time, and why, and who is responsible. The first responsibility of the full deacon is he is responsible for saying the responses of the litanies prayed by the priest during both the raising of incense and liturgy. And why I said that he is responsible for saying the liturgical responses, which I mean inside the altar. I said that because they are specific and only for the full deacon and archdeacon. In the system that the church put from the beginning, they put that who enter the altar with the priest is only the full deacon and the archdeacon. So from the beginning, they put the responses to be said by either the archdeacon or the full deacon. What about us? What about those lovely young children? We see them now entering the altar. We call that an exception. And when I say an exception, it is not a rule, and it will not become a rule. But the rule is, whoever is allowed to enter the altar during the liturgical service is only the priest, with whatever his rank is, the archdeacon, and the full deacon. And by the way, there is a fourth one who is allowed to enter. Back then, Christian kings, only the king who were baptized and anointed by the Maroon were permitted also to enter during the liturgical service. Why I mention that? Because so many times we get upset as parents. And so many times we get upset as a young clergy, which are the deacons. We call them now deacons, but they are not deacons. They are either reader or absaltos or ognostos, reader, or epidiakon. They got upset. Oh, for about 2 or 3 months, I didn't get into the altar and I didn't say any responses. This is discrimination. But let me say to you that you have no right to even be upset. Because from the beginning, it is not you who are supposed to enter the altar. And also for the parents, you have to bear in mind that what the church is doing to your children by taking them and put on them a tonia, and allow them to be with the deacons and sometimes to enter the altar, this is an exception. Why we have this exception? To keep those children attached to the church. That's it. But the main rule in the church from the beginning that they put that whoever entered the altar is the archdeacon, the full deacon, the priests, and kings. So please, let us rethink again our reaction to whatever happened in the service. And I'm saying that because I saw a lot from the parents. They come to Abuna and say, Abuna, we are very upset. We are not going to come to church. Why? What happened? Oh, they are discriminating against my son. Why? What happened? For 3 months, he didn't say even one response. Trying to explain, of course, they don't understand because either they didn't study what the rules of the church are, what the canons of the church are, or we give them, excuse because since their childhood as parents, when they were child, they saw this is the system, so they don't know better. So we give them an excuse. But now, when we explain that to you, either here in the church or on the TV, you should consider that the church is trying to help you raising your children. So instead of giving you the whole responsibility, we say, okay, let us help the parents. By doing what? By taking the boys and give them tunic and dress them like deacon, so they can't run in the church like that. So one of the servants, he will take care of them, and it says of the parents. Sometimes the parents are tired, sometimes they are not fully aware of what I should be at the church. So the main point, whoever allowed in the altar, in the sanctuary, is only whoever has a priesthood and the archdeacon and the full deacon, and one exception, which is the kings at that time. So again, what we see in the church now is an exception. Exception made especially for you, for the congregation, for the parents. That we took your children and we trained them either in the Alhan class, with a servant, with the Sunday school. We trained them in order to know how they should stand while they are praying the liturgical service. So please don't get upset when the system is enforced or we're trying to go back to the roots. So this is number one. He is responsible, that full deacon is responsible for saying the responses. And how he should say the response, we have to understand that the response, meaning that back then they either speak Coptic or Greek. So according to the congregation, if they understand Coptic and Abuna is praying in Greek, some parts of the liturgy is Greek, as you all know. So the response should be in the language that the congregation understand. Why? Because the priest is asking them to pray for the church, for example. So how they understand? By the response that be said by the full deacon or the archdeacon. How he's supposed to say the response back then, I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about back then when they start the system, he's supposed to have the cross in his hand. Why? Now we see only Abuna has the cross in his hand. Why the deacon has to have the cross in his hand? The cross in the hand means that Abuna is giving him the authority to order or give an order to the congregation to pray for a specific thing. Notice that the starting of the litany, of the response of the litanies is pray. It's an order form. I'm telling you to pray for the church, for the Pope, for the clergy, for the moderation of the air. So I'm ordering you. How come I order you? By the authority of the priesthood that he delegated to me as a full deacon in order to give you an order. Now we're trying to get this back. You find sometimes the deacon who are responding having the cross in his hand behind Abuna. That is the first responsibility of the full deacon. And you notice even in the khulagi, the congregation say, the deacon says. He didn't say the reader says, or the psaltos says. No, he said specifically the deacon, the full deacon. And of course the archdeacon is the head of the deacon, so he is a deacon. So this is specifically for them. Number 2 of the responsibility of the deacon, he is responsible for maintaining order and quiet in the church to ensure that the congregation stands with reverence and respect. Should I talk about that? How to stand in the church. Abuna, we are not young. We know how to stand in the church. I know that you are adult enough, but sometime, due to some circumstances, I am a mother, for example, with a child who is newly born, and I don't have experience with a newly born child. So if he cries, what should I do? So the deacon will help you out. The deacon will tell you that the normal thing to do is to take him out, calm him down, if he wants to eat, if he wants to change, if he wants to do anything, be with him outside, and then when he calm down, enter again. Now when this happened with some of the congregation, they got upset. Who are you to tell me what to do? He's trying to help. That's number 1. And he's trying to maintain order, and this is his job. So if I find, for example, this back corner has some noise in there, and I send one of the deacons to calm them down, you shouldn't be upset, because this is his job. This is his job. So number 2 of his responsibilities is maintaining order and quiet in the church. Number 3, what the deacon should do. He is responsible for recording the names or writing down the names of the people who have offered gifts and oblations to the church, so that the priest can remember them during the litany of oblations. Back then, in the old days, they didn't have lagna, and they didn't have accounting office, and they didn't have computers, and they didn't have checks written, and they didn't have, all that with what we have now. So back then, anybody wants to offer something to the church. For example, if I'm a farmer, and I have a piece of land, I'll bring some fruits from this land and give it to the deacon. And the deacon either use it in the liturgical service, if it is, for example, grapes, change it to wine and then use it. Or if there is no need for it in the service in the church, he give it to the poor. Offerings, oblations. So back then, they used to have in the church a special room. كانوا يسموها بالعربي الدياكونية، أوضة الدياكونية. The deacon's room. The deacon's room not for him to sleep, not for him to live, but for him to receive the offerings of the people and write their names in a piece of paper in order to give it to Abuna or the priest while he's praying the litany of the offerings or the oblation, so that Abuna can remember those names who give to the church. So, one of his responsibilities is recording the names of those who offered gifts and oblation to the church. Sometimes, and until this day they do that, one of the congregation who passed away, so his family is giving to the church an offering or oblation on his behalf. He is deceased. He passed away. But they want to give the offering to the church on his name. So he record the name of the person who passed away and give it to Abuna also to pray for him. Another responsibility for the deacon is cleaning the altar. Cleaning the altar. And the vessels that we use in the liturgy. Of course, as you all see at the end of the liturgy, تلاقي كده شماس حاطط فوطة الناحية دي وفوطة الناحية دي وعمال ينظف. What you're doing? Cleaning the vessels, cleaning the altar. Make sure that everything in order. Make sure that we have candles. Make sure that we have incense. And we have charcoal for the shoria. Abuna cannot keep up with all the things because he's busy with praying. So in order to help the priest in the service, this is his responsibility. And since he is the only one who is allowed to enter the altar, so he is responsible for cleaning the altar and the vessels. This is one of the responsibility of the deacon. Another responsibility, and I'd like to say it is not a responsibility, it's a permission. He is permitted to read the Holy Gospel of the Divine Liturgy. Why I said he is permitted? Because originally, in the original system of the church, the priest should read the Gospel. But now we see something totally different. Why is that? Again, because we want the deacons to share in the service. Originally, Abuna is the one who's supposed to read the gospel. What the reader will do to read the Pauline epistle, the Catholicon, the Ebraxis. But Abuna has to read the gospel. Now, and sometimes, and what we get used to do now, is Abuna is always delegate the reading of the gospel to one of the deacons. But originally, it's supposed to be the full deacon. Not anybody. The full deacon. That's why in his ordination, during the deacon's ordination, the bishop says to him, "You are honored to read the gospel." Of course, he reads the gospel at home. What is the meaning of "you are honored to read the gospel"? You are honored to read the gospel that is specific for the priest, if he give you permission to read it out loud to the congregation. Okay, another permission. I'm not going to say responsibility. He is permitted to carry the chalice, and this is we all see now, and give the congregation the precious blood by permission from the priest or the bishop. During the deacon's ordination, the bishop says to him, "Understand the extent of honor given to you to carry the chalice, the blood, which is the precious true blood giving salvation to the world." So one of his tasks, that if he is permitted to carry the chalice and give the precious blood to the congregation, he should do so. Now, when we have those lovely two deacons with us, we see that every Sunday, that they carry the chalice and give the congregation the precious blood. One of his responsibilities also is helping the priest in visiting the church's congregation. Specifically, the widows, orphans, needy, sick, and imprisoned. Those who are in prisons. The bishop says to him during his ordination, "Visit the Lord's congregation, widows, orphans, and the oppressed. Help whoever you can, caring for their needs and becoming an example for them by your good deeds." The bishop is telling the deacon who is being ordained that you should help the priest in visiting the congregation and attend to their needs and be an example for them by your good deeds. Lastly, by permission of the bishop or the priest, the deacon has the responsibility to teach and preach. So, for example, if you find one time the sermon is given by one of the deacons, don't question in your mind that it should not be like that. No, it is possible if the bishop or the priest give permission to the deacon to give the word during the liturgical service. Of course, needless to say that he is with the priest in every liturgical service. If there is baptism, the deacon should be there. If it is anointing with the meirun, the deacon should be there. Ordinations, consecrations, any liturgical service, the deacon always has a role to help the priest in the service. So now we get some idea about what is the responsibility of the full deacon. That's why we understand now the reason that I was speaking about, why we chose those full deacons to be in a high age or in old age, not children, not in the teenager. He has to be over 25. Over 25. Why? Because his responsibilities is great. And he has to fully know what he is responsible for. Not starting to learn. Not to be trained. No, he knows exactly what he should do in the service. Next time, God willing, we're going to speak more about the deaconship. Glory be to God forever and ever. Amen.